Out with the old, in with the new. Oklahoma goes deep dark red, except a little bit of blue. It's Mitchell Talks the News 9 Sessions with Grant Harms and Aaron Brillbeck. Next.
I want to first thank my Heavenly Father for putting me in this position. Thank you, Jesus. Ladies and gentlemen, a new dawn is starting.
Good morning, everyone. It's the News 9 Sessions with Grant Harms, Aaron Brillbeck. Thanks for being here, guys. What do you think? It's behind us now. It's all about governance. But we got to talk about how we got here.
The whole thing, I mean, there were more surprises that came out of that night, I think. There were a lot of non-surprises, but I think by and large, most people thought that Stitt was going to win, not to this degree. This was a beatdown.
It really was. It was a much wider margin than the polls had suggested. I think it's a much wider margin than most of us thought was going to happen. I think most people thought Stitt was going to win, but not by double digits. I mean, maybe within, I was thinking 8. I think, Aaron, you said you were thinking
6.
less than that, 6.
6.
So we had it at 3, the last SoonerPoll.com poll. So it was pretty surprising. I'm waiting to hear more from pollsters and party leaders about what happened with what I'm guessing is the rural vote.
Yeah.
In the last little push, we saw Stitt make up a lot of ground in those sections of the state. And what were the reasons for that? I don't quite know. My inclination is to think that it was the immigration policies on a national level and that getting fired up again, which is how Stitt won the primary over Cornette. I know people think it was the Bull Stitt ad, but it just wasn't.
It wasn't.
It was the Cornette wall ad. But it might be that. I also saw today Ben Felder at News OK doing some pretty good reporting on Twitter about people at the very end in the rural counties voting against teachers in the urban cities, in the urban sectors and suburban sectors of the state, just out of spite for the walkout, because they think that the urban centers are going to get more money for schools than the rural areas would. It's pretty classic in versus out voting.
What do you think led to that, though? Because there weren't any specific commercials directed towards that. What do you think led to that wave in the rural areas?
I think if it is what Ben was talking about on Twitter here, that it's the idea that the Edmondson supporters and those teachers had been so vocal kind of near the end of the campaign season, right after the election, and that created some resentment among rural voters who saw their tax dollars going to not them.
You think in hindsight the teachers overplayed their hand?
Maybe a little bit. We'll see what happens now that Stitt is in office and how his education plan, shakes out. I'm also wondering about how many Cornette Republicans who may have said they were moderates or independents and were on the fence about Edmondson or said they were going to vote for Edmondson, got to the booth and said, you know what, I'm going to vote for our guy.
Couldn't do it. Yeah.
I think there's a good chunk of that happening as well.
Yeah, and I think we saw quite a few votes going just down party lines. Anecdotally, a lot of people that I spoke with said they're not crazy about Stitt, but I'm a Republican. My father was a Republican. I'm voting Republican. So I think the party line factor was a huge factor.
Right. I think specifically when people, because really a lot of things were happening at the state, but the news and the voting is at a national level in races like this. So my guess is that you vote with your tribe. You vote with your people because they're yours. Even if you don't like the individual, they've at least got your side of things. And that's how I think a lot of people ended up voting, even though they might have told pollsters differently.
I was watching an OEA press conference this week, and they were talking about how much they'd won. Then I looked down there in McAllister, where Donnie Condit is defeated by Republican. Now, there's no more pro-education guy than Donnie Condit, right? So we'll have to drill down into some of this and see what the numbers are. But look, the voters rewarded the House leadership. Is there any other way to look at this? So they reward these folks, and they did you covered every day of this, and you covered every day of this, the tax increase last year for the teachers. But the governor, it's a little different tact. How are they going to get along? Because what was the final tally? Would Mr. Stitt, Governor-elect Stitt, would he have signed 1010 XX?
He said no.
He said he would not.
Okay,
he said that he was in favor of the raises, just not the funding mechanism for the raises. That was 1010XX.
So how do you get to where they're rewarding you the same way?
Right.
The voters reward Mr. Stitt, they reward the Republican leadership, and if it's an education year, that's like night and day, right?
Well, I think Grant's probably onto something with that also in terms of, I think a lot of the more rural voters said, look, Teachers, you got your 6,100. It was another, how much was it? 400 million more, 300 million more for
300 million more,
classrooms.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's a significant amount of money for year one. And I think that a lot of rural voters especially are tired of hearing more money, more money, more money, and not seeing anything out of it.
We had a Facebook Live yesterday with Dr. Caddy. I wanted him to talk about 48 hours later what we're looking at. And he said, education is going to have to be reorganized. He said it's going to happen. And my question to him was, that's one of those areas where there's the yays and the nays, and if you go out in the middle, that's no man's land, right? I mean, you get killed in no man's land. Who's going to be the first one to jump into that third rail? The House leadership?
Maybe the House leadership. I mean, like, they seem to benefit on Tuesday night from their own kind of rat screwing that you covered. You know, that they got rid of most
a Donald
of their...
Segretti reference.
You're welcome. You're welcome for that.
A Donald Segretti reference here. I mean, like, oh, that's
you're all
so
welcome.
good.
I'm an old soul. I am. But I think they benefited from jettisoning some of the more extreme.
The platform guys.
The platform guys, right. And so I think that they're going to be able to work that middle ground a little bit. Also, Kevin Stitt on a campaign being able to say, no, I wouldn't have voted for this thing, versus Kevin Stitt as governor having to work with the Republican House leadership day in, day out, saying no to that, I think are two very different scenarios. So maybe when push comes to shove, as governor, he's going to seed things a little differently because he might have a more complete picture or have more party pressure.
And important to note, in both houses of the legislature right now, they've got that 3/4 majority that they need. And Scott Inman's out of the picture.
Let me ask, I'm just about to ask that.
Yeah.
You're going to have a fight inside of the minority party, okay? And I don't even want to name names, but you know who it's going to be. There's going to be kind of the Inman crowd, and then there's going to be what I would call the centrists that get things done. One name in particular that I'm not going to mention his name right now. He probably doesn't want me to. But you know who we're talking about. It probably is Jason Dunnington. So
it kind of rhymes with Jason Dunnington.
It does
Okay,
rhyme with
it
Jason
does.
Dunnington.
Sounds a lot like that.
So in the meantime, what's left of the Democrats in the House are going to be having a war if certain people decide to run for minority leader. Are the Democrats going to count for anything now? How can they govern with their numbers so decimated?
Simple word, no.
Okay.
No.
I don't think they come together unless there is something that they can really all disagree on, and then the ties that bind are not ones of governing, because you can't from such a weak minority position, but more of one of protest.
Right.
And so we might see a lot of that this year.
So they either have a bomb thrower or a Bob Michael.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Right.
they're going to be a unified party, and I think last year and the year before with Scott Inman, they found their voice. So you've got your Emily Virgins, you've got your
Corey Williams is gone.
Corey Williams gone, yeah. But you've got those that know how to make a stink. They know how to go public, and I think that's going to be a thorn in the side for Republicans.
You think the best strategy, just asking political questions, best strategy for Democrats, make a stink or go along to get done what you can get done?
What's going to be best, or what they're going to do?
And what are they going to do?
They're going to make a stink.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would assume that they would make a lot of noise, hoping to come 2 years from now, re-energize those suburban and urban voters in most of the hot centers, the urban centers that we saw around the state, to maybe flip some of those districts back if they can.
And it can be effective if they focus on education and if they focus on criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
Those are the two things they have to really look at.
I also think transparency and accountability will be one of those things too. I'm not entirely convinced that Kevin Stitt is going to have money where his mouth is on that.
And I'm holding off on saying one way or another at this point, because the guy, he really has no background at all in terms of transparency. We just don't know.
What do you know about the transition team? Any news? We're going to have insiders or outsiders? He hinted the other day that we could be looking at some insiders, because you got to know where you're going, right?
I would assume that you would have to have some insiders on there. You get to be the outsider candidate, but you still need people to, Sherpa your way into this thing. You can't just plop yourself in the middle of an office full of telephones and computers, and just be like, here I am.
Well, here's a funny story. We went over to the governor's office on Wednesday. We ran into her in the hallway, and we were told that Stitt was going to be in the building and he was going to be meeting with her. So we happened to run into her, and I asked her, can we join you? And she says, absolutely. I'd love to get some shots of you guys. You guys get some shots of us shaking hands, doing the transition. We're not going to let you in the office while we're talking with him, but if you just want to get some video of us shaking hands and making that transition, absolutely. Peachy keen jelly bean. So we waited in her front office, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and it turns out that Stitt went in through the back door and then left through the back door. So pretty much blew us off.
And hopefully that's just them not wanting to do the media rat race right after the election here. I mean, I know he came on here on News 9, he went on a couple different places and did some interviews with some of the papers, and hopefully it's all just that he's just mediated out right now. But
Or does he have concerns about still being aligned with Mary Fallon?
And he may, but that's not really his problem anymore, is it?
Right, it shouldn't be.
We'll see. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and hope that moving forward, when he gets settled into this position, especially come January 14th, obviously, after he takes the oath, that things will be a little more normal. We don't really have any real reason to believe that it won't be once he gets there, despite how some of his campaign operated, but likely those people won't be the same people.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Governor's getting involved. She took credit for the economy here recently.
Saw that.
She was a little bit high profile. The best one of the day, however, is she has said about Mr. Stitt, Governor-elect Stitt, "My office is well prepared to help make him successful. The governor-elect's office at the state capitol is equipped with computers and telephones." Now, let me tell you, that is some uptown funk right there, okay?
They will have a budget book that's already prepared. They will have all the information about all the state agencies and their appropriations. We'll verse them on the challenges that are still out there legally or whatever the issue might be. But we'll be prepared to help them get more information so they can make informed decisions.
Thanks for the telephones.
Yeah.
Thanks for the governors. Please leave us alone.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's you probably want to limit the communications coming out of the governor's office right now, because after what Shepard was polling, I mean, CBS coverage the other night kept talking about Oklahoma having the most unpopular governor in America, and you just crawl under the table. All right, there was a touch of blue the other night. Speaking of things that happened that nobody saw, and nobody saw this one coming.
This was out of the blue.
Kendra Horne did, and her supporters did, but I think we had her down the Sooner poll 10 points.
Yeah, 10, 12 points.
Shows that people are ready for a change. They want representation in D.C. that's going to stand up and protect our access to health care against insurance companies that would deny it for pre-existing conditions or lifetime caps. We've got so many students and young people who are concerned about the weight of student loan debt, and those are some of the things that encouraged me to run, because we need a voice of common sense leadership.
But the fact is, she broke through, she's representing the 5th District, and that is a complete game changer in terms of how Democrats, well, that was it for Democrats that night, right?
Yeah.
Well, she got a pretty big infusion of cash last minute from Bloomberg. I think that Bloomberg saw that this was a race that could be won if enough bucks were dropped into it. And I mean, they hammered hard, and they hammered last minute. And that's the best time to run those kinds of ads.
I mean, she ran a hard campaign, and Steve Russell just did not.
And that's another factor. Steve Russell was basically MIA for the first month and a half anyhow. Just wasn't doing anything.
Were you covering that campaign the other night?
I was.
All right.
I was.
Did Colonel ever show up?
Never showed up. Texted his office. They said that he was going to be there, win, lose, or draw. Didn't show up. Finally, they sent a statement very late at night saying that he's going back to work in Washington, but not even really a concession. It was just another day, going back to work.
Sort of statement if you just didn't see it coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. I also think that, I don't know if, I didn't watch the Facebook Live yesterday, so sorry about that, but I heard Gaddy talk about it on the election night, that with Kendra Horne being elected, we're seeing the next 10 years of voting and voters come up and put her in office. And I find that interesting. I know that most Republican pollsters and operatives don't feel that way, both nationally and in the state. So I'm curious to see if that holds. If what we saw on Tuesday night was a real divide, not among parties in Oklahoma, but among rural and urban split, which I did a story about that this week, actually, where you can see some of the breakdown of the precincts. It looks a lot like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably exactly the direction that it's going. Let me ask you this. What do you think, is Kendra Horne going to vote for Pelosi for Speaker of the House? And if so, how bad does that hurt her in Oklahoma?
I think she's screwed either way. I think that she votes Pelosi, she's voting for a Republican, boogie woman who no one in Potawatomi and Seminole County is going to be happy with. But then you've got the other contenders for the speakership who are much more part of the progressive Democratic wing, and so she's kind of damned if she does
Damned
there.
if you do, damned if you don't.
So I think just her being a Democrat off the bat and having to vote within the party might not fare so well for those voters right away, but that might be one of the first things she has to vote on. She said she's going to wait to even think about impeachment, should that vote come up, to look for evidence first. She asked for that on Wednesday morning. And then she's got some other ideas about education and healthcare that she thinks that she can work across the aisle with, because she knows that this is a pretty purple district for her right now.
And she's very moderate. I asked her a bunch of questions about guns, for example.
Yes.
She's not opposed. She would oppose a ban on assault weapons, for example, but she would not oppose a ban on high-capacity magazines. So she tends to lean pretty moderate on issues that are important to Oklahomans.
Do you think that's going to change when she gets there? I mean, it's one thing to say those things here.
But when you walk into the freshman class orientation and they start applying pressure, much different animal.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I know that depending on which parts of Oklahoma City you're in, and which parts of the suburbs you're in, you've got some real progressives in those areas, some real liberals in those areas.
Right.
And so we'll see what happens and how her messaging comes across.
Yeah, in the biggest media market in the state, in the middle of town, Drew Edmondson won Oklahoma County.
He did,
right? And so it's almost like he had coattails in Oklahoma County. Carrie Hicks, Julia Kurt, and of course Kendra Horne. Before we get to the last topic, which is I'll take somebody's microphone away for that, but I want to ask you this question: do you think anybody has started to realize just how powerful that Greg Treat, Charles McCall, John Eccles, Roger Thompson, and these folks, that the leadership is, because they've got rid of the platform caucus and you've got a whole bunch of rookies in there. Kevin Stitt is a governor who is really going to take him a few days to even find out where the bathroom is. These men and women in leadership in the House and the Senate are sitting in the catbird seat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
I think it's their government to run probably for the first year until Stitt really gets his legs underneath him. And so this first session is going to be all about what the leadership is doing and isn't doing.
And I think they realize it. I talked with Eccles about this the other day, and he basically says right now for Republicans, again, having the 3/4 majority right now in both houses, brand new governor, like you pointed out, they did away with any opposition within the Republican Party. They got to put up or shut up.
The buck stops with Republicans, and we have the ability to govern, and that's what I hope we're going to go do. And I think you're going to see no excuses.
One incumbent lost in a primary, but no incumbents lost other than that. Our incumbents performed stronger than they did the previous cycle, so their constituents showed faith in them.
Yeah, it's a really big win on Tuesday night for the Republicans in Oklahoma. It's about as close as you can get to a single-party controlled state in the country now.
But the pressure's on.
It is.
If they blow it, it's 100% Republicans to blame.
And I'm not even sure Oklahoma would blame them, because there was a lot of people people said there were going to be pickups in the House of Representatives for Democrats this time. Remember that talk? We'll get 6 or 7 or something along those lines is what I was hearing people talk about.
I think there were 14 seats that switched around one way or another, but it was musical chairs. I mean, there wasn't a huge loss or gain on either side.
Yeah.
Last, we can't can't leave this without talking about how the Nationals might have impacted this election. I don't know exactly what the date is in yet, but the press conference the day after, I like to say that this is entertainment, the show business for ugly people, right?
In the midterms.
Here we go.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, that this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
But do you think that you demonized immigrants in
Not
this
at all.
election
No, not
to
at all.
try
I
to
want
keep
them. I want them to come into the country, but they have to come in legally. You know, they have to come in, Jim, through a process. I want it to be a process, and I want people to come in, and we need the people.
Your campaign.
Wait. You know why we need the people, don't you? Because we have hundreds of companies moving in. We need the people.
They're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an
you
invasion.
should, honestly, you know
miles
what?
away.
I
That's
think
not an
you
invasion.
should, honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings
Let
would
me
be
ask,
much better.
if I may
Okay,
ask
that's
one other
enough.
question, Mr. President. I was going
enough.
to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr.
Excuse
President.
me, that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question,
let's
if
go.
I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have
I'm not concerned
indictments-
about anything with
that you
the
may have
Russian
indictments coming down?
investigation because it's a hoax.
Are you-
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter, go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his butt
Well, I'm not
like
a big
the rest
fan
of
of yours either, so
I understand.
to be honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can. You repeatedly
You aren't the best.
Mr. President, you repeatedly, over the course of
Okay, just sit down, please. Well, when you report fake news, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
Mr. President, over the course of the last several days of the campaign, sir, at the end of the campaign, you repeatedly said that Americans need to fear Democrats. You said it would unleash a wave of violent crime that endangers families everywhere. Why are you pitting Americans? Why are you pitting Americans against one another, sir?
Peter, what are you trying to be him?
The only thing missing was Vince McMahon with some clippers, right? It's the only thing that was missing. And this country right now, I'm talking, half the people are like, oh, that Costa, what an awful guy. The other half is, what an awful person Trump is. From you, as reporters, watching what's happening with the National Press Corps and this president, your thoughts?
They both blew it, hardcore. I think Acosta, and this is where you and I disagree on this, I think Acosta took a wrong tact from the get-go. I'm challenging you, Mr. President, making statements rather than asking questions, and honestly making himself the story. And then I think the president blew it afterwards, because I think that he had some real momentum off of that one. And then they released that doctored video, which was probably the most god-awful stupid thing that I've seen in a very, 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 very long time. So who comes out a winner on this? Nobody.
I think from the standpoint of a reporter, it was just disgusting. To ban Acosta for that thing, to release the doctored video of that, which is pretty unconscionable. I mean, to say you have a point is one thing, but to release actual fake news while decrying fake news is another thing. I don't think Acosta did anything wrong in his questioning. I think that's our job, is to be accusatory, is to be standoffish in that way, especially with a president who continues to call the press the enemy of the people. I think that not allowing him to ask his question and then to having the response the president was likely going to have anyway was a bad look for the president. But this is one of those things where, as the media as a whole takes this personally, we go out and defend our honor and get bogged down in this thing instead of the issues that we should be talking about.
Next week at Madison Square Garden, we'll do this again, except we're going to have Vince McMahon in. All right, so this coming week, as we are out of time, this coming week they're going to be swearing in the new legislature Thursday the 15th, I believe. And at that point, the election's all the way behind us, and now it's all looking in the future as to what's at stake and who's going to be responsible.
Yes.
Do we get a special session after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, or an early special session after Christmas? Do you think?
I think these people are so fatigued that they're going to leave town. They may not be back.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I don't see a special session.
Okay.
All right.
What do you think? Do you think so?
I think it's out there. I think there are enough problems.
To tackle what?
Medical marijuana specifically. I think there are enough problems with that still.
Yeah.
That there might be some issues. I think maybe the healthcare stuff might pop up, but they might be able to push that off. I don't know.
I think they can put it off till February.
Okay.
Welcome, Governor-elect. All these problems are still there. We'll see you next week.